You're good to go ahead, Nancy. Everyone's in now.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our December social, I could call it, I suppose. We are going to do show and tell or bring and brag. And so I'd like you to put your name in the chat window if you've got something you want to show. I've had several people send me their slides ahead of time, so we're going to start with them. But in the meantime, I'll just go through a couple of slides from the Ontario Ancestors main. So let's close things and start this off. Okay. So this is our agenda for tonight. If we have time at the end, we might just open things up and just have a kind of a social chat, which will be nice. We'll see how far we get with the offerings, but that is our backup plan, is to have a little social chat at the end. And I expect this to take place of our social, Christmas social, so grab yourself a drink. I've got a hot apple cider, maybe a cookie or two, and just sit back and enjoy. And we're going to celebrate all the great discoveries people in the branch have been making over the last while. Don't forget that if you bring in a new member, or you're a new member and can hook up with a person that's willing to sponsor you, you both get 50% off your membership. And you've got till December 15th at 11:45 p.m. to get yourselves registered properly. And today, December 1st, is Giving Tuesday. And if you had it in your mind to donate to Ontario Ancestors, now is a very good time. They'll be sending out their yearly charitable receipts pretty soon. So go to the Ontario Ancestors website, ogs.on.ca, and the Donate Now button is at the very top of the homepage. Most of tonight's going to be about our main presentation, the Bring and Brag or Show and Tell, whichever it works out to be. So again, a short topic, only about 5 minutes. Put your name and topic in the chat window, and we'll get to you after we've done the slides from the early birds. So Janice Carter phoned me tonight and said she wouldn't be able to talk, but I do have one picture from her. And there she is. So we have, what we're going to do is a guess the object. So put that in the chat. Okay, well, Steve's going ice tongs, and Sharon says blocks of ice, and Jim says ice tongs, and Carol says from a blacksmith or maybe to pick up logs. Well, it's ice tongs for the big blocks of ice. And Janice told me a little bit of the background. She grew up on a farm on Skugog Island, and they needed the blocks of ice to keep the milk cool. And her father and other family members would cut the ice in the winter, and they had a wooden shed in the shade of trees, and they packed the ice in there with sawdust, and they would have that ice would last till July, she said. It was very amazing. So on to the next one. I'm going to ask Sheila if she could unmute herself. And if she wants, she could even whatever. What is it? Unblock yourself
I don't know.
and have your camera going.
There you
There
go.
we go. Okay, so she's going to tell us a story, hopefully, about this guy.
Yes, because I've been at home a lot and researching, and I double checked all my sources and whatnot. So I'm going to introduce you to my great-great-grandfather, the infamous Anthony Jock Cheaper. Anthony was born in Clerkenwell, Middlesex, England in 1837, 4 months after his father died, and his mother remarried when he was 2. He spent much of his teens in the Merchant Navy. And then Nancy's going to put up a timeline. So I started the timelines, and the right side shows the places where everything occurred. So this one also, let's see, starts with the marriage with my great-great-grandmother in 1858 in Lambeth, Surrey. His occupation was commercial traveler of books, and Anthony's father in the register was noted as deceased, but trade directories and his will record his occupation as a ribbon manufacturer. And then all the children were, oh no, there's just one child. So in 1861, in the Cheaper household was my great-grandparents and one living child. And then the rest of the children were born, and in 1871, they had 4 children living at home with a governess and a servant and 2 sons off at school. My great-great-grandparents eventually had 10 children. 3 died in infancy. And my great-grandfather, Anthony Sidney, was the only Cheaper to immigrate to Canada. From 1873 to 1879, Anthony overlapped his first family with a second family, having 3 children with the governess I mentioned in the census. He abruptly changed his name on the birth registration of his second child with the governess. Now at the age of 40, all records show him as Anthony Clark. There were no Anthony Clarks born about 1837 in Clerkenwell. So now the 1881 census, right at the bottom there, it shows the Clark household, which has Anthony, the governess, and I'll call her wife number 2. There are 3 children. And also there's a companion in the household for the wife who was suffering from Bright's disease. So now we'll go along to timeline number 2. And wife number 2 died in March 1882. And that her death certificate must have been sufficient to establish that Anthony Clark was free to marry. And he and the companion, now wife number 3, were married in June 1882. Anthony listed his father as a ribbon manufacturer. Anthony and wife's number 3's first child was born in December 1882. They had 3 more children in 84, 86, and 89, and they moved about England frequently. In the 1891 census, Anthony Clark, wife number 3, their 4 children, and 2 of wife number 2's younger children, as well as a 51-year-old governess. But it seems like Anthony didn't run off with this governess, so that's good. But while he's in that census, there's another 1891 census that appears listing Robert Clark with his fourth family. Between 1884 and 1904, this wife, number 4, bore him 12 children, and there's no evidence that they ever married, although the birth registers consistently acted as if they were. Now, timeline number 3, in the 1901 census, Anthony, his fourth wife, and 10 children, as one had deceased, are living in Croydon, Surrey. In 1906, my great-great-grandmother died at the age of 70, and she is still recorded as the wife of A.J. Cheaper, publisher's agent. Now, wife number 5 starts appearing in 1901 and had a total of 6 children between 1901 and 1910. Between the registration of the birth of the 4th child in 1907 and the last in 1910, Anthony reverted from Clark back to Cheaper. He was 69 years of age at that time. In the 1911 census, which Anthony Cheaper completed and signed, he shows wife number 5 and 4 Cheaper children aged 5 to 11, although all their birth certificates are Clark. This is the first census record Anthony Cheaper since 1871, although all of Anthony Clark's records are consistent with Anthony Cheaper's age, birthplace, and occupation. In 1918, Anthony Jock Cheaper died alone in York at the age of 80, a commercial traveler right up to the end. He was a bigamist for almost 25 years. He overlapped his households 3 times and fathered 35 children over 51 years. 28 survived childhood, and there are over 300 known descendants. My mother and I have several DNA matches with Clark cousins. A recent DNA match is Sarah, a 4th cousin to me, a 3rd cousin to my mother, and Sarah's mother and her grandfather were Clarks. In our correspondence, she said, yes, she'd known about the notorious Mr. Cheaper, but her poor grandfather never knew he was his father. He just remembered Mr. Cheaper used to visit every Christmas to give his mother money. He died never knowing the truth. And so that is my show and tell, what I have found out.
That must have taken a lot of sleuthing there, Sheila.
Yeah, well, I'm not the only one who's sleuthing, but I do have 75 to 80% of the birth certificates. And yep, he is definitely infamous.
I'll say. But at least you've got lots of DNA cousins.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know about any in Canada.
Okay. Thank you, Sheila. And I'm going to move on now to Stacy. If you want to mute yourself, I'll let Stacy unmute herself. I hope Stacy's here. I didn't go looking.
Okay, 3 clicks. Finally worked.
Oh, good.
And bravo, Sheila.
Yes.
My story is quite a bit different. This is not my family. This is Herbert Samuel Flack, born in 1913 in Penetanguishene. He grew up in Toronto. And can I get rid of this? Okay. The reason I am researching the Flacks is because my son-in-law is a Flack, and he has a big birthday coming up, and he's done an awful lot for me since I moved here. He's been installing, dishwashers and all that. But anyway, so with this birthday coming, my daughter said, you better do something big. And I right away thought that, he has mentioned before that he wanted to know about the Flacks. So fortuitously, Ancestry has been free in your own home since the pandemic. I guess Sheila's not the only one that's benefited from the pandemic, if you could say that. I've never paid for Ancestry. I've always gone to the library and just sent my records home and, had my own computer there. Anyway, I don't even have to leave my home now. As long as you have a library card, you have access until the end of the year. And I suspect that'll probably be extended again. Anyway, apart from Ancestry, I had this picture, which Jeff proudly has in his home framed. And the first thing I always think of is, my goodness, the clothing, everything now is so streamlined. It looks like he's wearing his long johns. But apart from that, there was a big scrapbook. And I kidnapped the scrapbook, and he hasn't noticed it's been missing. So it's been fun to find out some facts from the scrapbook and get some family photographs, because he wasn't the only one in the family that was involved in the sport. There were four Flack brothers, and one of them was the coach. The oldest boy was a coach. Anyway, apart from that, and my Ancestry, what was I looking at? Oh, this by the way this is grandfather's, is my son-in-law's grandfather. And he wanted to know about, he heard that originally he thought that the Flacks were German. And I had investigated that a while ago to see if they were Palatines, but that name doesn't appear. Anyway, it turns out they're Irish, and they could have been Irish Palatines, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Anyway, instead of being a careful researcher by starting with my son-in-law and going backwards, I did a little bit of that, but I'm also going from the top down, because I was indexing for the Tony project a map, and strangely enough, while I'm putting the F's in there, I see Samuel Flack, and he's in Manvers, and he's related. He's Jeff's great grandfather, and I thought, well, that's interesting that he's on this page. And at the same time, and I've got other information on him since, because you can go into the McGill, what do they call those? You can get all the maps in the atlases, and I found a few Flacks in their farms. Anyway, as well as that, on that page there were also Phallus. A lot of people named Phallus, a whole whack of them. And strangely enough, my daughter and I hadn't gone, but we'd done a Zoom meeting with Terry Phallus. I don't know if you're familiar with his books, but he was doing a talk from the Thornbury Library, and my daughter in her home and we were listening to Terry Phallus, and then here all these Phalluses came up on the same page too, and a Flack married a Phallus at some point. I haven't gone too far with that, but and just interestingly, I've also got a wedding album that I put together, not my daughter's album, but my own interest. And there was a seating chart there, and that gave me some other last names. And from there, even I said, well, that I know that Jeff's aunt, her second husband, had died since the wedding, and you can, as long as you have their name and a vague idea when they died, you just put in obituary and Google, and you've got their dates. It's easier when people are dead. Is Jeff's aunt, I don't have any information for except the first names of her children. Anyway, this is apart from this family. I intend to give as much as I can to Jeff. I'll print out from my software. I wanted to take him to Ireland, but I realized that I have a sort of an idea where they came from, but I have no proof of that yet. And I started thinking, well, I haven't got my own Irish family. I can't get them out of Newmarket so far. So we'll work on that. And I've done some things with some of his crests and more pictures. And this was probably taken at the 1932 Olympics in Lake Placid.
That's very impressive, especially that little toss in at the end.
Well, yeah, I'd almost forgot. He didn't do well at the Olympics, and that really disappointed me until I started seeing all the other things he had done. He was a teenager with records up the yin yang, and he was. I found out that the Old Orchard Skating Club was at 375 Dovercourt Road or whatever, and I did the Google Earth thing, and there's nothing there. Well, there's a park. And I couldn't believe how disappointed I was. Like, I've gotten very involved with these people, and I thought this was a big deal, and the club isn't there. And I'll get in touch with Toronto Archives because there isn't even a picture. But they were even mentioned in Maclean's. I have in about where is that? Yes, in an article in Maclean's in 1929, speed is their game, and a little paragraph about a family affair. Naturally, the undiminishing popularity of speed skating must necessitate some method of bringing up the young speeders to replace retiring veterans. Where do the newcomers get their start? It is surprising. It's anyway that there's a family compact in the skating world. Here are a few examples taken from the 1928 National Title Entry List. Black family, 3. So those would be the skaters, and then there's also the brother who's their coach. Anyway, it's fascinating. We don't have anybody famous in my family, and not even anybody infamous like Sheila's family. Anyway, that's my talk.
Okay, thanks so much, Stacy. It's much appreciated. We're going to go along now to Anne DeLong, and we'll ask Anne to unmute, and she has I saw Anne earlier in the participants list. We can't hear you, Anne.
I've asked her to unmute Nancy, so I'm just waiting.
Can you hear me?
We can now. Thanks, Anne.
Sorry, it kept saying that I couldn't unmute myself and that you had to do it.
Okay.
So after you asked, then I could, anyway.
Okay, so tell us about this little lady.
So several years ago, my husband Dan's mother died, and we were emptying out her house. And we came across this doll. And when she was alive, Dan's mother had told us, because we'd seen it before many years earlier, she told us that her mother had crocheted this doll for her when she was a little girl. So this was made by Dan's great grandmother, or yes, his grandmother, Dan's grandmother, and the little dress was knitted later by his mom. So it's I guess maybe 90 years old at least, this doll. and I don't know how she managed to crochet the stitches so tightly, but it was in a drawer for a while, and I came across it recently and thought somebody should see it because it's kind of cool.
It is.
All right.
Okay.
So next thing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, a couple of years after that, my own mother died, and we were cleaning out her house, and we came upon this uninteresting looking item. My dad, throughout his adult life, was mostly self-employed at various things. He was a printer, an electrician, yes. Well, anyway, he did many different jobs but because he was self-employed, he would always have one of these diaries in which he would write down, the jobs he had to do for people and how much he had told them that it would cost and those sorts of things, and when he had finished it. So when I found this book in my mom's house, I thought it was one of those, and I threw it in the drawer because I thought, oh, well, I'll keep one of those, and it's an example, to remind me of my father. But I didn't open it because I'd seen so many of them over the years that it wasn't of immediate interest when I was trying very hard to get the house ready for sale. But not long ago, again, I was looking through cupboards and I found it, and I decided to look through it. And Nancy, could you go to the next slide? Inside is not, okay, so there are the same items that my dad would always write. But then on certain pages, they were on vacation, and my mother made a trip diary. And this is a diary of their trip to Skagway, and they went up to the Yukon and to Dawson City and all kinds of things. And this page is telling about how they went on a helicopter ride over the glaciers. So I was very glad that I didn't decide to chuck this book, which the rest of the book is full of things like scribbles about, $28.92, and it has to be done by Friday and that kind of stuff. So there's a big section in the middle that is very interesting, and it's all my mother's account of her trip. So that's a discovery that I made, and although it's not all that genealogical because I already knew they'd gone on a trip, I'm finding it very interesting to read. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Anne. I find it very interesting because I've been there.
Yes. Actually, I did find another book, similar type of book, but I found it some time ago. It was, one of those little books where you write addresses in and phone numbers. And my mother had taken it with her when she went on a trip to England and Wales. And they visited relatives, and she wrote down all their birth dates and that sort of thing in them. So that was very handy to have, to find. Oh, yeah. 20 years later.
Definitely. Okay. Okay, so Carol sent me a last minute photo, which unfortunately I didn't see it until I saw her note in the group chat. Carol, what we'll do with that is when I'm finished the slides, I will go and retrieve that photo from my email and put it in a slide for you to talk to afterwards. Okay, so the next one is mine. So does anybody have one of these interesting looking things that says postcards on the front? And when you go inside, here's a sample page. It's literally a photo album for postcards. I've never seen a thing like that before. And it's very intriguing to me. It's also falling apart, so I'm glad I didn't bring it into a meeting before. But it's very interesting the way that they have the slots so you can put the postcards either vertically or horizontally, but you can still pull them out and read the messages on the back. So is there anybody, write in the chat if you've ever seen one like this before, because I have never seen one like this, one that's strictly for postcards. Oh, Sharon's noting that photo albums used to be like that. So I'm assuming she means that you had the slots that you could put the corners through instead of having to use the stick-on corners. Oh, Bob Bell has some as a member of the Toronto Postcard Club. That's cool, Bob. Okay. So I'm going to just, it'll probably take me a couple of minutes to bring up Carol's photo. If there's any chat you want to do in the chat pane, go right ahead. I'm going to stop sharing for now. Okay, can you see the picture now?
Well, I can, so I'm presuming everybody else can.
Oh, that's good. So is that Carol?
That's me.
Okay, go ahead and tell us all about this handsome gentleman.
So that's what struck me, actually. That's a good segue in. I'd like to make this a bit of a shout out for the Clarington Museum and Archives. I'm new to the group, and I'm actually from Ontario, but I didn't start doing genealogical stuff till I'm in New Brunswick now, so it's a bit awkward. But I use a lot of email things, and I was reading something in the Orono Times that led me to try and track down a quilt that might have been in the Clarington Museum. So I emailed them and got chatting with a lady, I'm not sure, young, old, whatever, named Victoria Karakian. I don't know if any of you have encountered her, but she was very helpful. And that's not mine, I'm not sure where. She was very helpful, and she didn't know anything about the quilt, but she said, well, who are you researching? Give me some names. So I threw some names at her, and she came back right away, and she said, oh, well, we have this portrait of one of them, and this is Guy Gamsby from Orono. Guy was actually kind of an interesting fellow. He was born in the United States, emigrated with his family by walking from the United States to Sherbrooke, Quebec. While he was in Sherbrooke with his family, he and his brother married two sisters from the Sherbrooke area, and they moved to Orono, I think around 1830. So, and then from there, he became quite a prominent citizen in Orono. And so obviously prominent citizens had their portraits painted. So I think he died in 1859. So I'm thinking this looks like it might have been, I don't know, he would have been 57 when he died, not that old. So this might have been around 1850, I'm taking a guess. But what I really liked about it is that he actually, it looks like he's kind of smiling, and he looks quite genial. And I thought, oh, it's such a nice change from a lot of the portraits that were done in those days, where they seemed compelled to look as stern and, you know, grim as possible. So I was so pleased that she found this portrait. I'm presuming that it's quite large, and that at some point or another, there's still Gamsby homes in Orono, and there's a lot of Gamsbys around there, but I'm presuming at some point this was just deemed too large to hang over anyone's fireplace, so it was donated to the museum. I also know there's a file there. She sent me his will as well, a copy of his will. And I also know there's a file there. So I'm just dying for this COVID thing to be over so I can get back to Ontario and have a browse through that. But at any rate, the other thing that I found this got me looking elsewhere, and I was cleaning out our storeroom and discovered that I happen to have a copy of the Historical Atlas of Northumberland and Durham counties. It's not an original, unfortunately, because that would be worth like $1,500, but it's one of the limited edition reprints. And when you look up Orono in there, there's a lovely map of Orono in the 1800s, which shows the extent of the Gamsby holdings. So this guy Gamsby here established quite a dynasty, I guess, in Orono, and they had a huge hunk of property in the southeast corner of the village, and hence the fact that he would have this nice portrait of himself. But so it was just kind of really interesting to actually see, because there was not really any photography in those days. Oh, what I was going to say was in this atlas, there's a lot of drawings of a lot of the prominent citizens in Durham and Northumberland, and most of those guys look just so serious and scowling at whoever was doing the drawing. So this is just such, I think, a charming portrait, and I was so pleased to find it, and my great thanks to Victoria, and I'm looking forward to meeting her sometime in the future. So that's my little family artifact, not in my house, but it's finding things like this that really just keep you going in your search for other documentation and things.
Definitely.
I'm very pleased to have joined the group. I just joined Ontario Genealogical in June, I guess. So I'm very happy to meet some of you tonight.
Well, it's been an unusual year, but it's had a slight bonus for us all in the adoption of the Zoom technology. Now we can have our distance members at our branch meetings, and it's awesome. I really am so pleased.
I think so. I think it's fabulous.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Did anyone notice any other offerings from people with a show and tell?
Hi, Nancy. Sharon Johnston says she has something.
Awesome. So Sharon, if you could tell us about it.
Hang on, I'm just trying to unmute her here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Now, Sharon, do you have a show? Should I close down my?
No, that's okay. I'm relatively new as well, but I came across something while I'm working on my daughter-in-law's mother's family. And it's a Scott family, born in Woodbridge, ended up settling in Peterborough. And it's the strangest thing, because when I was doing some research, I found a death certificate actually, for a child at the age of 5 in 1947 that was hit by a car and killed. Lo and behold, the street she lived on was the same street they lived on, and the last name is the same, Scott. So I sent it off to Nancy, my daughter-in-law's mother, and I says, I know this isn't a relative of yours, but maybe somebody in the town knows of somebody. And so she's checking with a lot of people that have been there forever to see if somebody can find out about this 5-year-old child that was hit and killed by a car. So, but it was so strange. Same night, same last name, same street, same everything.
Boy, that almost gives you chills.
It does. It's weird.
Yes. Wesley did put a note in at the very beginning of our chat. So can I ask Wesley to unmute and tell us about that?
Yeah, I found an image of it if you can let me display my screen.
I'm going to stop my share. And if you can turn on your camera. Perfect. We see you.
I see me. How do I display my screen?
Hi, Wesley. Just hit the green share screen button on the bottom. Oh, I might need to make you 1 second here. I might need to make you a co-host temporarily. There you go. You should be able to see a green share button. Share screen. There we go.
Okay, can you see this?
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Okay, this is a lock of hair from Emma Butson Johnston. It was cut from her head by her daughter-in-law in 1897 as Emma lay in her coffin in Chicago at the ripe old age of 43. Emma was the daughter of Henry Butson and Sarah Harrison. This took quite some research to figure this all out. But basically, the bottom line is that on the 9th concession, the northernmost concession of the eastern part of Whitby Township, Henry Butson was living. And on the first concession, just across the town line road, the first concession of Reach Township, a few lots down to the west, was Robert Harrison and his wife, Mary Ward, and their daughter, Sarah, and a whole bunch of other children as well. And Henry and Sarah married, I believe the 1861 census said they married in 1851. Unfortunately, they must have married after the 1852 census. I guess they married in 1852, not 1851. But for those of you who have researched Reach Township, you know that the 1851/2 population census is missing for all but I think one page. So Sarah does not show up, but Henry does because he's in Whitby Township in the 1852 census. But Sarah's father shows up in the agricultural census of Whitby. And I found them in the land records as well subsequently. So this is how I know, that they just lived right across the town line road, a few lots down. The problem for me was that Sarah was always just Sarah. I had no idea what her maiden name was for a very, very long time. I mean, I'm talking, I first found out her name was Sarah probably back in the 1960s. And it was not until probably about 2010 that I learned finally what her maiden name was. So we're talking, half a century that it took me to figure this out. What finally figured it out was the land records. Henry and Sarah show up in the Ops Township in Victoria County census in 1861. And that's actually Sarah's only appearance in any record that I have ever seen, other than the baptisms of her daughters. And it basically said she was born in Canada, roughly 1835. it took a lot of research, and I'm not going to go into all that, but I was actually tempted at one point to try and have the hair DNA tested, and I'm glad that I didn't, because finally I did get a DNA match with someone, and we've now figured out exactly what happened, and that was that Sarah Harrison, Henry Butson's wife, Emma Butson's father, died roughly 1862, 1863, and Henry remarried in Ops Township. And all four of the daughters from his first marriage were sent to Manchester, which is in Reach Township. I think it's concession 4 or 5, I'm not sure which. And there's a 150-year-old farm there that's the Lamb family farm. And the mother of the Lamb family, actually there were 2 mothers because the first one died, but the second one was the sister of Sarah Harrison. And so the 4 girls were sent to live with the Lamb family, and 2 of the girls married, and the Lamb family members were witnesses, at their marriages. So we had pretty strong evidence that this Sarah Harrison was the sister of the mother of the Lamb family. The problem was that the Lamb family had not begun doing their own family history until 1908. And by then, nobody remembered Sarah because Sarah had died back in the 1860s. All of the other brothers and sisters lived long lives, but Sarah did not. And so it finally took the DNA match, and we actually have now many, many DNA matches that have confirmed this. But it's just a treasure to have this. The size of this is probably 2 inches high and maybe 3 inches wide. It's a little box from some piece of jewelry that they put a piece of cotton in and put her hair on top of it. And it's been a family treasure now for more than 100 years.
That is really cool. And if you ever do want to get it DNA tested, it costs a lot more money than an ancestry test, I'll tell you.
Well, I am, I actually have traced many, many of their maternal DNA descendants. So if we, as I understand it, hair will be able to tell you maybe the mitochondrial DNA, but probably not the autosomal DNA. And so I already know a whole bunch of other mitochondrial DNA descendants who, if I really want to know what her mitochondrial DNA is, we have many people who could provide that information.
Good. Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting, Wesley. Okay, I threw in a couple extras in case we had some time. So I'm going to go back to sharing and Leslie.
Hi, Nancy. Actually, Mary Alice has something.
Oh,
in the chat. Oops, excuse me.
So if Mary Alice could unmute, and if you want, you can turn on your camera too.
Unmute.
There we go.
I'm unmuted. This is just a quick, I wasn't the one who did the original research on this, but I found it since. Anyway, I have a great aunt whose name was Catherine Henrietta Clay Reed. And the Clay part is spelled C-L-A-Y. We have lots of ancestors that are Catherine. There's no Henriettas that I know of in there. Nobody named Clay, and then the last name was Reed. And the person who did research found out that they left from England. They were Scottish, but they left from England, came over to the States, and then up through Canada, Southern Ontario, and ended up on Manitoulin, most of them. So they were in Southern Ontario for a while. But anyway, this Catherine Henrietta Clay, when they left England, did not exist. She was born 2 days before they landed in New York City. And then they traveled up through. And when they did the research, they found out that she was born on the ship called the Henry Clay. So that's where the Catherine Henrietta Clay Reed came from. She was named after the ship she was born on. I just thought it was cool.
It is cool. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. And just a bit of background here. My husband and I have a couple of electric bikes, and we decided that we'd put them in our storage locker here at the condo. But in order to do that, I had to take out 4 boxes from my mother's house. And they've been there 9 years. So I was digging through some of these boxes, and I found this Who's Who in Ontario application that my father had filled out. And, you know, it tells me a lot of stuff about him and his career and his education. I knew all that stuff. But on the back of it, they had put just a little bit of extra information. And he said, neither my father or my mother went beyond grade 4, but they achieved quite a lot of self-education. My father, for instance, gained stationary engineer papers. He was an oil well driller working in foreign fields such as Borneo, Burma, and Ecuador, as well as in Canada. My mother was the eldest child in a family that homesteaded in southern Manitoba, and mother had to stay home and look after the younger children. And that just brings back a flavor of the pioneer days, doesn't it? That the mother had to stay home and take care of the children. Now, I wondered, this Who's Who in Ontario, did my father buy a copy? Did he even submit this? But when I look at the price down here at the bottom, it would have been $195, and I doubt very much he would have had the spare change to actually get a copy, and there's no date on it. So I may have to wait for a library that's got Who's Who in Ontario and go through every one of them to see if he actually did submit it. The other thing I found is his Royal Canadian Air Force flying log. And he was a bomber pilot. He flew, he flew Wimpeys at first, Wellingtons, and then he flew, oh dear, it's escaped me. He flew with the 10 Squadron, with the English Royal Air Force, and they were based out of Melbourne, Yorkshire. So I've just copied one page here. It includes a summary, January 1st, 1945. His last ops up here at the very top was Dortmund coking plant. And then he was certified having completed his first operational tour of 33 sorties and 158 operational hours. It's kind of interesting to look at this and realize that from 1942, when he first entered the forces, to this date in 1945, at the very bottom, he's written in 701 hours of total flying time. So just kind of cool for me. I'm going to just do a few things about future meetings, and then I'll turn this off and we can just have a chat session for the rest of the time. So in 2 days, we have the Ontario Ancestors webinar at 7 p.m. And Janice Nickerson is a very good speaker. She's talking about religious newspapers, not just for the clergy. Our next meeting is January the 5th at 7:30 p.m. again via Zoom. We have Linda Korup. She's going to do a lecture on researching your female ancestors. So that'll be really good. She also, just a short description of that meeting, trying to find ancestral female information in early Upper Canada records can be a very daunting task, and I agree with that one. Many avenues can help you pursue that, and that's what her presentation is going to be about. Many of those pathways and the resources made increasingly available as the fight for women's rights proceeded. So that should be very interesting. At first, I asked Linda for Assay's records, but she said she'd already done a webinar for the whole Ontario ancestors on Upper Canadian justice. It was December 2019, and it's, if you're a member, it's there on the OGS website. Go to Education, Webinar Recordings, and choose December 2019. The next two meetings after that, we've got Mags Galden from Ottawa. She's going to talk about WikiTree, the ins and outs of a global family tree. And in March, we have one of our local members, Nick Post. He's going to be talking about using the FamilySearch.org website. There's our contact information. You can always send things to durham@ogs.on.ca, and our corresponding secretary will send it to the right person. So that's the end of my PowerPoint. I'm going to stop my sharing. And at this point, I will entertain anybody to turn on their mic and we'll just chat for the next half an hour if you want. And if you want to leave and go find some treats to snack on, that's fine too.
I'm intrigued by Sharon Johnston's last name, because any Johnston in the Durham area, I'm assuming that's your husband's name, but are they from the Durham or Old Ontario?
No, they're not, but they are from Ontario.
How far back do they go in Ontario? Or
I haven't done his tree yet, so I really don't know how far back. Winchester, near Ottawa, there was a lot lived there. Parry Sound, his father was a trainman in for the CN. He was killed in 45 in a coupling accident. And so that was at Mimico Yard.
how long ago did they live at Winchester?
There were, well, it was aunts and uncles that were living in Winchester.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but his immediate, no, they were up in Parry Sound and Mimico area.
I have a pre-Confederation Canada Johnston's webpage, so I'm trying to find all of the different Johnstons, that were there before Confederation, and untangle them, and then find somebody who's a living DNA descendant so that we can get them all Y-DNA tested.
Well, I just mailed in my DNA kit, so I'm hoping to get that back. But I think my mother's family is even more interesting. My grandmother came in 1910, literally crossed Canada in a wagon with her parents and a sibling, and pioneered in Saskatchewan. And the stories she used to tell me were unbelievable. So I've been trying to research them as well. So yeah, I'm dealing with too many families. That's my problem. And I've only been doing this for a year.
I'm going to put my email address in the chat. So if you can email me, if you can do a Y-DNA test on your husband, that would really be helpful.
He passed away 23 years ago.
Well, do you have a son?
Yeah, I've got 3 sons.
Yeah, if one of them could do a Y-DNA test, that would be great, because we're trying to get Y-DNA for all the different Johnston families that were there before Confederation.
Okay, if you want to put your email address there, and then I can email you and we can stay in touch. How's that sound?
Yeah, it's already in the chat. So
okay.
It says direct message, so I'm not sure if it's showing up public or not.
No.
Okay, have you got a pencil?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's www.johnston01@yahoo.com.
Johnston01 at, you're on Yahoo too. I'm on Yahoo.
Yeah.
We're Ma Pa J.
Ma Pa J at Yahoo. Okay, let me write.
It's Ma Pa J 2000 at Yahoo.
Ma Pa J 2000. Okay.
And the thing is that not everybody spells Johnson the same way, as you know.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people like to take the T out of my last name and put it in my first name.
Well, I just tell everybody I've got the English T.
No, I tell them Scotch, not Swedish.
Is Brian still on with the postcards?
Brian? Do you mean Bob Bell?
Wasn't it Brian?
I don't believe he ever was on. He was just referenced that he had a collection of them of Whitby.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Brian Winter has a large collection of
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Anne, and something you said, Nancy, reminded me when you were talking about the Who's Who books, that I have a collection of books. It's a 4-volume set from 1927 of the history of the province of Ontario. And it's full of biographies with great big, I don't know if you can see, great big pictures. There's a cool looking guy of famous people in Ontario and what they contributed. And I came across this collection in a rather unusual way. My father belonged to an organization called The Fish, the Society of the Fish. And okay, now he belonged to this because we lived in a little village, was Hastings, Ontario, where there was no hospital or ambulance service, or there was no 911 or anything. So this group of people got together, and they had a telephone which moved from house to house once a month, but it always had the same number. So whoever's house it was, if it rang and somebody needed help, you had to go and help them. Cool idea, right? So because it was a 30-minute drive for the ambulance to come from Peterborough, you know, anyway, so my dad had this in his house, and a man was having a heart attack, and he drove him to the hospital and saved his life, I guess. And so when he died years later, he left him his book collection, and it was a very unusual book collection. He had a lot of metaphysical stuff and things like that, but among it was this history, like several books that I thought as a teacher I should not let my dad give away to the libraries and things. And so that's how I ended up with this. But so you never know. At the time I wasn't doing genealogy, but I'm sure that all these biographies would be very useful to somebody.
Yes.
I think I have a couple of the Who's Who somewhere in my collection as well. I am the one that's a member of the Toronto Postcard Club, and I do have some postcards. Not a huge collection of them, but I do have some.
Okay, good. Now, Anne put something in the chat here that I thought was pretty cool. My grandmother was named Gladys Nubia. Nubia was the ship on which her father had returned from the Boer War. That is,
Yes, and then she named her daughter Nubia Mary. And my aunt hated that name so badly she would not be called by it. And for her whole life, we just knew her as Nikki.
Nikki.
But
Okay.
she just did. I think Nikki was probably a stylish name at the time, whereas Nubia, well, it sounded like a country in Africa, which it was.
Never heard of it.
Well, I don't think it's a country now, but Nubians were people from Africa, right? So,
Where was it? Wasn't Nubia south of Egypt? So be like
I'm not sure.
Or am I totally off base? I think Nubia was south of Egypt.
Yeah. But at any rate, that's what the ship was called. I guess it was an African ship bringing home troops.
Mm-hmm.
Nubian Desert's in the eastern region of the Sahara Desert.
What was that?
Nubian Desert is the eastern region of the Sahara Desert.
Okay, so I could put it right below Egypt.
Yeah.
He says located in the desert sands near the Nile in modern Sudan. The ancient culture of Nubia played a decisive role in shaping Egypt from the 8th century BC, serving as that kingdom's 25th dynasty in the late period.
Oh, interesting. Sudan.
Zoom meetings. We can all Google while we're
guilty.
What would our grandchildren say if they saw us doing Googling while we're doing a Zoom? Grandparents doing that?
Yes, that's right. Well, you've seen those ads on TV. People our age are supposed to be barely able to, point to their email, right?
Well, I have to admit, this past 7 months has been a forced technical growth.
I've even done 2 Zoom meetings at the same time.
Oh no.
Yeah, I've got two computers on my desk, so I put one on each computer, and I'm judiciously turning off the sound on it. The one I just had to attend briefly, and I was able to do it long enough and give my regrets and move over to the other one full time. But you can do it.
Good for you.
Let them face each other, turn them so they face each other, and then you can go for lunch.
I'm curious. I see a Stinson here. I don't know Deborah Stinson, but getting back to my flax, apparently the first lady I have is Isabella Stinson, who married Samuel Flack, and then one of the children married. So she would have been a Flack, but her mother was a Stinson, and she married a Stinson. And I guess they're pretty common this was in Manvers region, so I don't know where Deborah's hailing from, and whether that's her maiden name or married name.
I think Deborah's unmuted herself.
Yes.
Quiet
Deborah.
though.
Deborah, are you still there?
Maybe I'll speak for Deborah. Hi, I'm Heather. And
Hi.
Deborah's, I'm from the Toronto branch, and so is Deborah. And Deborah is shy, but she's from the Toronto branch, and she's got some Quaker background. But Deborah, you're having trouble getting in? I've enjoyed this very much. I'm one of the folks who don't like the drive in the wintertime to Durham. I've been a Durham member for like 4 or 5 years, and my interest is Quakers and lots of other stuff. And I'm stuck in Jamaica right now, so it's another story. But And yeah, very
Fine stuck.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm doing some. Oh, there you are, Deborah. I was speaking for you, and Deborah's always in Hawaii. I'd like to know how she gets Hawaii every time.
Ah,
Sorry, my computer just crashed. I had to run over to this one.
I answered for you, Deborah, and I'll get out your way now. Bye.
Yeah.
so where's your, do you live in Toronto?
I live in Toronto, yeah. My family landed in Cavan and Danvers and Emily, and
Okay, that sounds like
started
the
places
same.
like that.
That's the same people.
But yeah, I believe I've got an Uncle Copeland Stinson who married Flack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they
Okay.
moved.
That
moved
name
out
kind
to
of
Winnipeg.
jumps. The name kind of jumps out at you. I wondered if Copeland was a family name as well, but I haven't seen that. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's a Stinson thing.
Are you researching the Stinsons or?
I am, yep.
Okay.
Unfortunately, like everyone else, the minute you get back to Ireland, it's a mystery. And I think they were actually probably originally from Scotland.
Well, people put them in the census as they're Scottish anyway, just depending on.
They say they're English, but I think over time they actually came from Scotland, because I've done DNA tests for myself and my brother. Our amount of Irish gets smaller every time they rejig the formulas.
I lost a lot of Irish.
It looks to me as if because they were in Cavan here that they came from there, but I have no proof of that. So.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. They, as far as I know, Samuel Stinson, the father, came from Drung in Cavan County, or County Cavan, and came over. And then, as far as I know, he married the little woman here, he probably met her in York at the time. And then they married and had a number of kids, and they bought the farm up in Cavan Township. And until relatively recently, it remained in family hands.
Right.
But
we must talk and not. I mean, as I say, this is the Stinson. I'm researching the Flacks, but the Stinson, this Isabella was the first female that I have. That's and then the Copeland came into it. You can spell Copeland almost as many ways. I couldn't believe how many ways you can spell Flack.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It even becomes La Flèche. Anyway, I can put my email, or does that appear, Nancy, on the membership lists, our email, like a member of Durham?
I have a membership list, and it does list if you're a member of Durham branch, I do have your email.
And I don't know if Deborah is.
Yeah, I'm a member.
Okay, Stacy, I can send it to you then. And Deborah, I can include you.
Excellent.
Stacy's.
Now, Stacy, was it you that was talking about the Follises?
Yeah. Well, I figured that would mean something to you, because you and Dan are both. Have you not met somebody with that name?
We went to the Follis, some Follises from that area had a gathering just before the pandemic.
Oh, that's where I heard you talk. Yes.
But my husband Dan has a relative who married into the Follis family and then had 15 children. So there's a lot of Follises from that area that are related. They're descended from her.
And this Terry, do you read Terry's books? They're amazing. He's an identical twin. It's Terry, and anyway, I this last book that he was talking about that we were part of,
But the lady who organized that group has written this book called Reflections of Bethany. It's a new book that's out.
Now, is Bethany in Durham? Like
Manvers.
the old The old Durham?
Old Durham, Manvers Township.
Yeah. So it's just come out, and she's not sold very many, I don't think yet, just because, you know, a lot of stores, people aren't going in, you know.
Where is it available?
Dan, she's telling me where it's available.
It's Aunt Laura's Tea Room.
Is Aunt Laura's Tea Room in Bethany?
Yes.
Is it open?
Her name is Kathy with a K, Morton.
Morton.
So are there any flax in there? Flax or Stinsons? I mean, as I say, a Flack married an Eleanor Fallis, and I can't remember when that was.
So here's the back of the book, and you can see the wonderful index that's not there.
Yes.
So don't know.
Stacy, I borrowed the book from Dan and read the whole darn thing in 2 nights.
Okay.
And unfortunately, if there were flax in there, I skipped over them. I was looking for Ingrams, Hamiltons, and McGuire's, sorry. And my Ingrams came from County Cavan to Cavan. Well, actually, Manvers.
And where's it's Heather. Is it Heather that said she was interested in the Quakers, and you're the Quaker. You're part Quaker.
Yeah, well, my Goulds and Chapmans and Jameses and stuff like that up around Uxbridge, definitely.
Quaker royalty.
Well, I'm not sure.
Goulds, yeah.
Yeah. I've tested Goulds. I've tested Y-DNA, my 2 cousins. Okay, name's gonna go.
By the way, wasn't it Halifax as your father flew?
Correct.
That's what we talked about it last week.
Yeah, Halifax Mark III is what he flew. He was W for Willie. That's what the plane was called, W for Willie.
What is that Y DNA?
Why? What about?
What is it?
Y DNA? I think back to high school biology. It's the Y DNA is part of the sex chromosomes.
Right.
So being female, we have 2 X's, one from dad and one from mom. Well, if you're male, you had an X from mom and a Y from dad. And that Y DNA is passed down unchanged, father to son to son to son to son. And it's really, really deep. So if you get matches that don't have very many mutations in them, you can go back 10 and 15 generations.
Wow.
And that's why they were asking about the having that your son's test.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Sharon, right?
Yes.
Yes. So that's why he wanted your sons tested, because they got their Y from their dad.
So a regular DNA isn't going to give you the same kind of information.
No, the regular DNAs you can get at most of the companies is what's called autosomal. So it's chromosomes 1 to 22, not the set chromosome 23, which is the sex chromosomes.
But you do inherit some of that from the father's line too, so you still will get some information.
Yeah, exactly. So the nearer generations, like the last 5 generations from your sons, they'll get cousin matches to them as well. But if you're going further back than 4 or 5 or 6 generations, then you need the Y DNA to link you to other Johnstons.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another book here that Dan bought from the author recently. It's a newly written book. It's called Port Darlington Sands, 120 Enchanted Summers. It's by Rick McGeechan and Gary Cole McEachern. Okay, and It's an illustrated and social history of the Bowmanville Beach, starting in 1900.
Oh.
So if you had people who
my late
lived
husband
down by
yes,
the beach,
that was
or
Peter Summers, yeah.
Yeah, or if they had cottages there, and you know.
And where did you buy that?
Well, Dan walked to the person's house.
Oh, it's a Bowmanville author.
Yes.
Yeah, I bought one as well from him.
Sorry, what was that?
I bought one from him as well.
Oh, okay.
Can Dan put that information on the Facebook group? Or
I'm sure he can.
Yeah.
I'm sure the author will be grateful.
Yes.
Okay, now I've got something in the chat from Kim, who is our Zoom host. Sorry, but who was talking about the Scotts in Woodbridge? Just curious. She has Scott family in Woodbridge. Is anybody?
You're kidding. Yes, it was me.
Oh, Sharon.
In actuality, my daughter-in-law's grandfather opened the first funeral parlor in Woodbridge, and he was a Scot, and that funeral parlor is still there. And Nancy grew up upstairs in the funeral parlor. And then she got married and they moved to Peterborough.
The funeral parlor doesn't sound familiar though.
It's still there. Well, it was there 5 years ago when I went to somebody's funeral. It's Wilford Scott.
Yeah, no, the ones I would be talking about would be Frank, and his wife was Florence or Flory.
I'm working on the family, the Scott family, and I'm just trying to bring it up so that I can see.
Do you know where they came from?
Who?
Like the Scots, like which?
Oh, I'm going back a few generations and they're all around this area.
Okay. So it might not be the same line, because mine came with my great-grandfather in 1907 from the Aberdeen area.
Yeah. But, oh, that's 1907.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to get up my, okay, Wilfred, Florence, let's see, Woodbridge. Yeah, oh, come on, now it wants me to.
It's scary.
Technology is great when it works. Okay, yes, Florence Davina married John Edgar Phillips. Was the Phillips family part of?
No.
Okay, because Nancy Scott married a Phillips. Now, Wilford Scott, which was the funeral director in Woodbridge, he married Hazel Ivor Evans.
Yeah, those names aren't jiving with mine at all.
But I'm wondering if that child that I had, let's see if I can see the mystery one. It's a mystery death certificate. And there it is. Okay, let me enlarge it so I can see what it is. Okay. Yeah, Peterborough. She died in Peterborough on street was Lansdowne. And printed full name of deceased. Also, this threw me because her name was Nancy Ann Scott. My daughter-in-law's mother's name is Nancy Ann, and she was a Scot.
Does it say who the mystery girl's parents?
I'm just looking down, child. The father was Gordon Fabian Scott.
Yeah, that's
pretty specific.
Edna Isabel Hardy was the mother.
Oh, the Hardy sounds familiar though.
And yeah, it was 1945, I guess. August of 1945. And they say here, fractured neck being struck by an auto car.
Yikes. Yeah, it does. None of those Scott names seem to run through my family, but then the Hardy kind of, that name's also in my line.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
You never know. I just started genealogy, and within 4 months, I discovered a 4th cousin twice removed.
Oh,
And
it's fun finding them.
that's without DNA.
Yeah, it's fun finding them. I found a bunch actually over in England, on my dad's maternal side, but the paternal side's all Scotland.
When Dan and I started doing our genealogy, because we were planning to have a family reunion, we started by walking down to our local library a couple of blocks away, and we pulled out a couple of history books, and one of them was the history of Darlington Township, and looked in the index, and there was his 4th great grandfather, which we didn't know at the time because we hadn't done any genealogy, but sometimes things just happen.
They do. Actually, I just finished getting contacted by the Orthodox Church in Saskatchewan because I'm trying to track down marriage licenses. And anyways, they found my grandmother and her wedding. They gave me the number for her certificate for marriage, and the minister that married them has the same last name as what her sister's new husband was. So it gave me another direction. So, yeah, they may be related. I know in the Scott family, they have one member of the family that went from a teacher to a minister and ending up marrying his daughter and her fiance.
Okay, I've got one here. Stephen wants to ask Heather. Heather, Stephen says, Heather, just wondering who your Quaker relatives were.
Stephen, if you're Stephen Wood, it's your wife's family. I'm still up to my eyebrows at Orbices, and I've got them coming and going every which direction.
Okay. I thought the name looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. And now I know.
Yeah, and I've also discovered that they were abolitionists, and I'm absolutely, totally convinced that they were part of the Underground Railroad. I'll send you. I made I did a wee thing at the Toronto branch about. I don't know when Deborah, you must remember, Deborah, when I made a presentation. No, but about, I'll happily send you my blurb. It's the Orbis family was named in Isaac Orbis, my guy, the one that Durham County kicked out of the town for hitting somebody over the head with an axe handle. He went to he took land in Wisconsin, and his brothers all stayed, and they're all buried in the Quaker cemetery off of behind the Home Depot there. But
the Hicksite Quaker cemetery.
Yeah, the Hicksite one, and they so Isaac Orbis accepted from the Underground Railway in Vermont. He had a boy, and boy is a relative term in Black history. So he had a boy sent to him from the it's not relative anymore because he was 17, but from on the Underground Railroad, from the Vermont Quakers sent to Isaac Orbis in Whitby. They sent that runaway slave, and we've got it documented. We know it. We've got the diary and everything. It's a long story.
Oh, fabulous!
Yeah, I'm happy to. Maybe one day I'll talk about it here, but if you'd like, it's a short Black history. Oh, that's when I did it. I'm babbling because I can't remember. I'm having trouble remembering my name right now with this COVID thing. It's really bugging me. But there's no question in my mind that the Orbis family was not involved. And I'm sure that the Whitby connection is huge. And
Heather, when did the boy come to Whitby?
Well, we can't find him in Whitby. We lose him, we lose the boy, and we've got nobody, and a bunch of us, including our David, your David here, the Black history researcher in the Durham group, yeah, David Fuller, yeah, and we can't prove it, but
when did this happen?
just a minute. I'll find my presentation. Sorry. I can't remember my own name these days. Let me find the presentation. Orbis, where are you? Orbis?
Even a ballpark figure would be useful.
Well, a ballpark, I don't know. 1860s. But it was. No, it was before. It was before the It was as at the height of the Underground Railroad. So it's been 1850s. But I have no doubt, absolutely no doubt. And Nancy, if you're looking for a gap, it's about 15 minutes long, and I'd love to share it with folks because I am sure
it'll be good for a short topic then.
Yeah, sometime. And because I've been working hard on another project, and my head is full of home children right now. So and Jamaica, British West Indies. How you get there, I don't know. Genealogy is fantastic, but so I haven't been thinking about the Orbises. It's more about Black history than it is about the Orbises, but it definitely ties in.
I wrote down that it was an underground railway talk.
Yeah, it was an underground railway talk. So it's
and the Dave you were talking about, who's in our branch, he gave his talk. It's Dave Clements.
Clements, I love Dave. Yeah, he was great. Yeah. He's lovely.
He gave his talk at our March 2018 meeting. So it will be on our YouTube channel probably if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I'm interested. Thank you. Oh, and I have seen it because I went and found him, and he went and talked to librarians or something after that. I remember.
Oh, good.
Anyway, so
does anybody have Farrells in their family? Farrell.
Nope.
Not yet.
No. Well, the reason I'm asking is because I know some of you may know that I enjoy editing Wikipedia. Well, there was an article in the Toronto Star that sent me to Wikipedia to improve an article about a woman named Leonie Farrell. She worked for the Connaught Labs at the University of Toronto during the time of the polio epidemic.
Wow.
And she, Jonas Salk is the one who invented the vaccine, but then they had to find a way to test the vaccine. They had to duplicate it and duplicate the virus, because I guess it was a killed virus vaccine. So they had to make huge amounts of this virus so that they could then kill it and make a vaccine. And they had no way to do it. And she is the one who, at the University of Toronto lab, the Connaught Labs, who discovered how to do it. And,
oh, wow.
And so because of that, they were able to test the vaccine and then use it and saved many lives. And of course, topics like this are of interest because of the recent pandemic. So I just thought if there was anyone who had Farrells in their family, they might like to know about this person, because apparently at the time, because she was a woman, nobody gave her any credit. Jonas Salk came to Toronto to meet the team that had done the work to create this, and she wasn't allowed in the room because she was a woman. It was some kind of room where only men were allowed.
Oh,
The men's room?
the men's room.
No, like a club room. They decided to hold a men's club room.
A
or something
men's
like that.
club. Probably
And
a
this was
men's
in
club.
1960, around then. So
Yeah.
so it wasn't that long ago.
It's interesting, in the Star today, Linda McCaig's column is about what happened with Connaught and how we no longer produce vaccines. And she doesn't mention this Pharaoh woman either. But of course, that wasn't the focus of her article.
Well, that's right. The Connaught Labs did many marvelous things. This was just one of them.
And it was, it was publicly owned. We owned it, and we could have done what we need to do now, but we no longer have that capacity.
Brian Mulroney that sold it off? I can't remember. Yes. Somebody about that time anyway.
So Jim has put a URL in our chat window.
Yeah, the Connaught Laboratories. I went to school at U of T in pharmacy, so I was always walking by the Connaught Laboratories. So
me too.
It's a change now. I don't know if it's the School of Architecture now. I'm not sure what it is now. Everything's all morphed, and I haven't walked by it in a while. But
so what class were you? I was class of 75.
I was 89.
My son was 2005.
It's interesting. My father, he never mentioned this until recently, but when we moved from Lethbridge back east, we changed trains in Winnipeg, and he said the signs were everywhere about the polio epidemic, like how bad he felt that he was almost exposing his family to this, you had no choice. I mean, you had to get off the train and get on the train to Toronto. But and I was thinking of him again today. My father just died in September. But I was also remembering that the first time I ever heard the word quarantine, he, like Nancy, grew up in Windsor, and he had to go to hospital. He had scarlet fever when he was about 7, and he had to be hospitalized because his father was in food service, and if he didn't go to hospital, the family would have been in quarantine. I thought that, do you know the Phillips Markets? My grandfather worked for Phillips. Anyway, it might have folded before my father was there. He went to hospital in 1929, I think. Anyway, there was a whole ward full of little boys, and they got up to mischief. I guess I don't know exactly what they were doing. They threw them out, basically. And while he was in the hospital, his school closed. He had to go to a different school. So it was a very interesting story. My father never told me any genealogy stuff, but if given the right opening, anybody will tell you, don't ask them what, I asked him one time about Christmas, what were your favorite, there's a questionnaire in my software, your favorite music and your favorite. My he only remembers pretty much going to Woodward's to look at the toys. That was his, they didn't do big Christmas thing, but Woodward's, of course, was a huge store in Detroit. And for somebody who didn't have a lot of money, that was what you remembered. And after he told me that, I found there's a website for all these defunct department stores.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
We would occasionally, very occasionally, go take the tunnel bus over to Hudson's in Detroit.
Well, maybe I've got Hudson's. Maybe Woodward's is
maybe it's the road it's on or something.
Maybe it's the Western Vancouver. Maybe it's Hudson's. Anyway.
Yeah.
It was a big,
yeah.
It was Christmas.
Well, I have a short story in my family about an illness. My grandmother, when she was about to be married, got scarlet fever. And I guess she was quite ill, and her hair fell out, as sometimes happens when you have, stress. And then she would not get married without hair. So she put off her wedding for, I think, about a year and a half, and until her hair grew back in it. And, you don't very often see pictures of people from I guess maybe around 1920, women with short hair, but she She had little short curls in her hair.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I do know
Can
that
I, sorry, go
polio
ahead.
kind of did hit Bowmanville, because my father-in-law grew up in Bowmanville and he had a mild case of polio, whatever that might be, but it did actually get its way to Bowmanville in the 1930s, I think, is when he became caught it or was infected.
mm-hmm.
We couldn't go to the swimming pools, and I guess I was right at I mean, you remember standing in line for those shots?
Yes.
Must have been mid-50s.
Yeah.
So that was Connaught, eh? That was
Mid to late. It was school, and I was born in 51. So I'd say, 58, 59, something like that. They had a great big punch machine that made like 2 circles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In your arm.
Well, at that time, Leonie Farrell was leading the team that was planning and developing the process by which the vaccine would be distributed. They were she didn't invent the vaccine, but her team was working on ways to make it, all the logistics so that it would be easy to distribute and keep better and those sorts of things.
Too bad she wasn't alive now to tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, the one year we also had to drink something. There was a
oral.
Yeah.
Sabin.
Sabin, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know which one came first, the punch or
We had the needle. Yeah, I think the Sabin that was a different team. I think that was from France. And anyway, but I didn't know this story about Connaught until I read this column today. And then it's funny that you brought this Farrell. Yeah.
There's actually a picture of her in the article from that URL that I sent. She's sitting in the laboratory it's from her, courtesy of Judy Anderson, her grandniece of Dr. Farrell. So you can actually see a picture of Leonie Norwood Farrell.
So can I tell you about Anne was saying about women doctors not being allowed into meetings and so on. A friend of mine from Woodstock, Ontario, he's a PhD in history, Canadian history. His family are very good friends of my best friend, and we see them a lot. And his mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, they're divorced. His ex-mother-in-law was, and I just looked up her name because I couldn't remember it, Frances Kelsey. She was the first, she was the woman who refused thalidomide, wouldn't allow thalidomide into Canada or into the United States. And she lived in the United States, and she was born in British Columbia, but her family is Canadian, and she is Canadian. She died in Canada about 3 or 4 years ago. And that was the woman who stopped thalidomide in the United States and Canada. And she was a doctor, but I think a pharmacist, you pharmacist persons, I think a pharmacist, pharmaceuticals were her thing. So nobody ever, and she fought men to do that. So
yeah.
Well, now, how did she do it? What did she have a position, that gave her some influence?
With the American, and I'm not entirely sure what it is. It's with the American, like the FDA or something, whatever the equivalent was then. Yes. And it says she helped shape and enforce amendments to the FDA drug regulation laws to institutionalize the protection of patients in drug investigations. She was a tough woman, and I actually met her twice and didn't know this. And I have a vague memory of her, but she was and she lived she was close to 100. She's a very tough woman. So women do get something.
Yeah, once in a while.
Once in a while.
So during that same period of time, between the mid 40s and the 60s, we not only had to deal with the thalidomide, but also too with the polio, and also with, oh, my mind's gone blank now. What's that chest infection?
Whooping cough.
No, not whooping cough.
Tuberculosis?
Sorry?
Tuberculosis?
Tuberculosis. Yeah, I ended up with an aunt that ended up in Western for a year with it. So, and people are complaining about the COVID, but we had so many things going on within that period of time.
I'm from a poor, I'm Scottish born, as you might find by my accent, and my town, a third of the population died in, and I forget what the span was, and my mother's two favorite twin aunts died from tuberculosis. There isn't I test positive for tuberculosis.
Yeah.
There isn't a person in my town that town then. And it's a suburb of Glasgow. So I have no clue what Glasgow is. I just know from family lore that so many people died from tuberculosis. So,
well, people are always talking about migration patterns, and they talk about wars and land opening up. But really, I think that disease has a big effect on migration sometimes. That's the reason my father's family, who came from Cardiff, they've lost several children to what they called thesis, which was consumption, same thing. And they just decided they had to get out of this smelly city and go somewhere else. So they went to Toronto.
Well, to another smelly city.
And they moved, no, but they lived way out in the country, south of Eglinton, over by St. Clair.
Oh, wow. That's in the sticks of the woods.
So the Toronto branch had a presentation, and Deborah, maybe you'll remember, you're younger than me and you still have a memory left. But the Toronto branch gave a presentation on the 1980, they brought in an author, an expert on the 1918, all the soldiers died. What the flu? And you could have heard there was a huge audience. I mean, 100 and something people, and you could hear a pin drop. And I clearly remember that man saying to us, Deborah, do you remember? He said, "This can and will happen again." And we all left there, nobody giggling and laughing and talking the way we normally do, nothing. And we are where he told us we were going to be. Deborah, was that September? I think it was September of last year, before the person drove down Yonge Street and killed everybody. And
yep. I remember that.
Yeah, it was give me the word. It's prescient, I think. It was pretty scary.
Well, I had the same thing happen. I gave the anniversary talk at our church last October, and at that time we were in the midst of fixing our steeple, and like a huge, almost $1 million repair. And I compared it to rebuilding after we had a fire in 1919. And I knit it together about the First World War, the congregation hit by the First World War, and the Spanish flu, and then the rebuilding. And I says, well, we've just got rebuilding. We don't have war and we don't have an epidemic. Well, who knew?
Yeah.
Yeah, you laugh at it now, but and some people, I know when I was saying it, they were just, what are you talking about? But with our history background, we know about the Spanish flu. But
are you saying, Bob, things could always be worse?
Exactly.
We also had Hurricane Hazel.
Yep.
All in the same period.
No, Hurricane Hazel was 59.
No,
yeah,
54. I was there.
But tuberculosis was running rampant, and polio was just coming down.
Yep.
So yeah, there was a lot of more disasters if you really look at it, the timeline.
My grandmother
our house was always quarantined.
My grandmother told me about when she was kids, remembered seeing cards on a house, red cards, saying that the house was being quarantined.
That's what I was just saying. Our house was always being quarantined.
Yep.
Heather, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was going to say it's 54. I looked it up. For what quarantined? What were the red things for during the Spanish flu?
No,
I'm sorry, someone said there were
cards. Bob?
Oh, what was this? Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
What were the red cards for?
No, this was, she didn't really remember, but she just told me that she remembered as a child some of the houses. She was born in 1918, so she would have been after the flu, but she remembered some of the houses at times would have red cards.
It could be whooping cough, or it could be
Ours
scarlet
did.
fever.
Ours did. Ours had and we had the health nurse out to the point where she recognized everybody in our family. But that was posted on our door many times.
Wow, I've never seen that.
Well, there'd be lots of diseases, you know, smallpox, mumps, the red measles.
Yep.
Whooping cough was a bad one.
Whooping cough, your diphtheria, your cholera. I mean, it's a wonder humans actually survived.
Well, some of them didn't.
They didn't.
By killing off a lot of our population, it's still a wonder the rest of us managed to get through things. and you know, you go back far enough, you got the plague, the Black Plague, and there's been a lot of disease over the years.
And society can't deal with COVID.
I know, we're spoiled.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to thank everybody. I'm going to have to go. It's the bewitching hour, my bedtime. And I've really enjoyed this as you know, my first meeting, and I know I'm going to really appreciate being a member of this.
Sharon, before you go, I just see your last name, Johnston. You're the person who mentioned Johnston?
Yeah.
My name is, my husband's name is, my husband's English kind of, and he, my last name is Ioannou, I-O-A-N-N-O-U. It means son of John. It is the most common name in the world, except for Muhammad and the Arabic names. It's son of John, Ioannou, Yanis, Yanagis, all those names.
Oh, wow.
So Jones, Johnson, we're all the same.
Yeah.
So nice to meet you, Sharon.
Nice to meet all of you. And you should tell that to Wesley.
I will, whatever.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. And
night.
I'm going to leave you too, folks. Thank you, Nancy. This has been very, very nice. And I thoroughly enjoyed talking with people.
Yes, well, it was nice for a change, a social evening.
Yes, it's very nice.
And we've been missing that.
I will be in touch with you, Deborah.
I've enjoyed listening to everybody, and I hope that, well, I'll be back in January on Zooming, and we'll just see whenever we can do it in person.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I think I'll call for the end of the meeting now too, because we're pretty close to the 2-hour mark, which is probably longer than we've done any of these Zoom calls. So thank you everybody for staying and chatting. It's been lovely.
Night all.
Thank you. Merry Christmas,
Good night,
everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Good holiday.
Whatever form your Christmas takes.
Yes.
See you soon, Debbie. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.